Well, so hi everyone. So today I wanted to go into the subject of dairy. We know that we heard a lot about it already, and we heard a lot of different things. Dairy is bad, especially for MS and autoimmune conditions. Um, and then on the other side, on mainstream, we're seeing all this advertisement that dairy and milk are the healthiest food ever, with the 5 stars, etc. So what I would like today is to find where the truth is in all that. Because the main difficulty is actually that everybody's right. Yes, dairy can be the healthiest food ever, but for some reason, it's a big no for MS and autoimmune conditions. But again, dairy is a really complex subject because there's not just one dairy. Dairy is a group of food, and there's a lot in that. So we're going to explore all that today. Just looking at my notes again because there's so much that I want to share, but I want to be sure that I'm not missing anything. So yeah, really what I want today is not to tell you dairy is bad, don't take it, or dairy is good and please have it. What I want is for you to have the knowledge to make your own choice in all that. Because it is complex indeed. So the main myth that I want to break is that milk is not required. It's not something that we need to have to be healthy as a child or as an adult. And that's a belief that has been put on us for a really long time, that we need to have milk, that milk is a necessity. I'm not saying it's bad here. I'm just saying it is not needed. And as always, it needs to be put in context. Amongst the diets full of junk food, or when you don't have access to a lot of things and the variety is really low, milk could be indeed the best protein that you have access to. And it's full of minerals and plenty of nutrients and vitamins. But in the context of a good and balanced diet, a healthy one, that would be actually useless to go to dairy to top up your nutrients because you can find everything in everything else. Milk or dairy will not bring something more. It will just bring things that you already find in other food. And for that, I would take, of course, the example of calcium. Because again, that's a belief that has been put on us that we need milk to have calcium. First, calcium is not only found in dairy. And the truth is, leafy greens are much richer in calcium than dairy. So if we are looking to top up the calcium and we need to go dairy-free, we just have to turn toward the spinach, kale, silver beets. All the leafy greens are really full of calcium. And the problem with calcium is not really how much we taking in food and how much we absorb, but how much we are losing. And that's the main problem that we have nowadays. It's not that we're not taking enough calcium in our diet, it's that we are losing too much. And why we are losing some? Because of what? The main culprits are, as always, sugar, alcohol, and stress. So you can have all the milk, dairy that you want in your diet, but if you are under stress, if you have a diet that is high in carbs and sugar, and if you add on that alcohol, you're losing calcium. So that was the first point. Then why milk is not required? So milk and dairy accelerate growth, the growth of the cells. And that's why it's indeed a crucial part of the nutrition for an infant. That's why there's breastfeeding for all mammals. And that's really important for the infants to develop and grow new cells. But this growth factor keep existing. And that's why when we turn out to be adults, if we keep drinking dairy and milk, we keep having this growth factor in our cells. I'm getting a bit confused here. What I mean is that the cells keeps growing thanks to dairy, but what we don't know is which cells are growing. Are they the healthy one or the unhealthy one? That's where dairy do not make the separation. As an infant, yes, it would do the job to make it grow. As an adult, it can unfortunately grow unhealthy cell as well. And dairy has been linked like that to some cancer because it's helping all the cells without any difference to grow and can grow cancer cells as well. So with all that, it's not to be scary, but again, with this little introduction, it's all a question of balance and moderation. Again, I'm not saying milk is bad, milk is good. I'm saying it's not required. And maybe it's, yeah, I always have a bit of trouble with this word moderation, but maybe that's how we have to see it so far. But of course, there's more. We're going to go a bit deeper into food allergies and why there are some consequences in MS and autoimmune conditions. But even before talking about all these different, about these allergies in autoimmune conditions, even in healthy people, 60 to 70% of the world population is lactose intolerant. So here I just want to have a little break to explain the 3 different types of allergies. Food allergies, I mean. There are allergy, which is immediate. It's like for people allergic to peanuts, they're eating peanuts and it can be really dramatic on the moment. That's what we call an instant reaction and a food allergy. Then we have the food intolerance. Food intolerance is a digestive problem. It's when we're lacking the enzyme to help us break down the food that we're actually eating. As an example, I was talking about lactose intolerance. We need the enzyme lactase to break down lactose and absorb it. I will come back into that. And then there's the last type of allergy, which is the food sensitivity. And this one is the most common one for all autoimmune conditions and the tricky one because it's a delayed response, which means that we can eat something and feel completely fine, not having any digestive issue or any problem on the moment, but it creates consequences on the long term that we might, long term, when I mean long term, it can be weeks, months, even a few months ahead. And we actually, when we get to the reaction, if there's one, and if we notice it, it might be really, really hard to link it to this food that we've been eating 6 months ago. So that's where it's really, really hard one. And for this one, there's just 2 ways to find out. It's either test for food sensitivities or a really strict elimination diet. Sorry, I was looking for my word. So that was the 3 types of allergies. We're going to try to keep that in mind. And I'm going back into my lactose intolerance. So why is there so many people, 60 to 70% of the world population, that are lactose intolerant? The human evolution has been really, really fast. And we didn't all develop the ability to produce the enzyme lactase, which is needed to break down lactose. lactase is actually present mainly in infants for them to absorb the milk from their mother. But we're not having it, not all humans having it. So it's just sadly a fact. We don't have all the ability to break down lactose. Lactose, which is in a milk, a sugar, because in milk we have some carbs, sugar, proteins, and then all the macronutrients. So that's one aspect that can happen. Now, again, intolerance are much more or less severe depending on the person. Sorry. So some might have an intolerance, but might be getting away with that and not really noticing it. But sorry again, that's one aspect. Then we're going to go more into what we call the food sensitivity. I'm not talking about food allergy, direct allergy, because I think if someone has an allergy to whatever type of food it is, you can notice it really, really quickly. So food sensitivity. What we have to know is that dairy, the same way as gluten, can damage the gut lining, creating what we call a leaky gut, and then from the leaky gut, much more food sensitivities. So that's what happens usually in autoimmune condition. That's a cascade of reaction. And if the gut is leaky, we get sensitivities to food and then another one and keeps piling up. So maybe the initial sensitivity has been created by something else, gluten, for example, but then dairy came on top and created more damage because the gut was already inflamed. And then these two, gluten and dairy, are acting in a system that actually it's a bit complex and I might not enter too much in the details, but activate a system that actually activates zonulin that opens the lining of the gut. So leaky gut, I'm not sure that he knows exactly what it's all about, but that's when the lining of the gut is supposed to be tight and keep things in and just let passing through what needs to go through. When we have a leaky gut, that means that this junction in a gut are getting a bit loose and more things are able to go through. So a leaky gut, that's when food that are not supposed to leak through the lining of the gut are ending up actually in a system and where they are not supposed to be. And then as a consequence, are creating more issues because simply they're not supposed to be in systems. So the immune system are seeing these foreign particles and starting to attack. So I think you can see and start to have the picture of the cascade of inflammation and sensitivities. So that's one part, and this concerns all type of dairy. Now the positive things, because I don't want to be all gloom and doom in a presentation, but you can heal a leaky gut. It's a lot of work. You need to remove what's inflammatory, and just through food and maybe supplements really heal the gut, and then the food can be reintroduced. And again, it's elimination diet as well to see if you tolerate it or not. So it's not all negative. It's just to know that it can happen, and it is happening in honestly all autoimmune conditions. Now, the other problem with dairy, we keep going, is it's also the way it has evolved and how it is produced now. We have to know, and I think most of us know, that there's a lot of hormones that are dumped into the milk that we are drinking because the cows and other animals, but many cows, they need to be pregnant all the time when they are getting milked. And for that, they are injecting hormones. So these hormones are not staying just in the cows, they are going through the milk and then through the food that we're eating. So we're actually drinking and eating hormones, which little dose might be okay, but too much create more imbalance. And we know as well that with autoimmune conditions, there is a lot of hormones imbalance. Not only hormones, but hormones imbalance are part of it. Again, not for everyone, but most of us will have something like that. I think just to finish on that, we might have heard of early menopause in MS, and there's a recent study actually that showed that the symptoms of the presentation of MS really looks like the early menopause symptoms. So they are really, really similar. And I think it's not only in dairy that there's hormone study, also in meat and a lot of things that we eating, but that's one of the issue. So again, it's not just to put all the blame on dairy, but to know what's happening in that type of food and be open to the fact that it can happen to other types as well. And on the top of hormones, there's also all the way that is that milk and dairy is processed. So all the pasteurizing, homogenizing, etc. And also, again, on top of that, the way the animal is fed. If the animal is fed with grass or grain, this can have an effect. So the way it's processed and the way the animal is fed can have an effect on the shape, change the shape of the protein in a dairy, which then the body and our system will have issue to recognize and absorb. So that's mainly about the evolution of how we're consuming and producing, consuming and absorbing dairy now compared to what it was before. And we can make a parallel with gluten as well on why gluten seems to be more harmful now than what it was before, because on the top of all the other things, there's this evolution that has been transforming the protein and the shape of the proteins in the food that we're eating, even when it's called organic. So that was kind of a complex part, but we're still not finished. As I said, there's a lot in dairy and a lot that I need to share. So in dairy, there are lots of different proteins, a lot of them. We heard about casein and whey, which are the two main ones, the one we're hearing the most about, but there's actually plenty of them. And depending on the animal, that will be different protein as well. But I will focus for now on casein because that's the one that has been linked to most of the digestive issue and autoimmune conditions or chronic health conditions. So casein, which is just one protein in dairy, there's two types of it. You might have heard of it as well because it's kind of getting popular. There's the A1 casein, which is found in the most productive cows. And that's why it's the most present in store, actually, because the cows are really, really productive. So that's why we've been focusing on this type of casein and milk. But sadly, that's also the one who creates the most of allergies. And then there's the casein A2. And this one, of course, is not as productive. So that's why we found less, but it's a much better quality. And we found this one not only in cows, because the A1 is cow's milk, but the A2 will be in grass-fed cow's milk, sheep, and goat. So we coming back to something a bit more natural already, because the animals are actually grass-fed and not fed on grains and hopefully no hormones and etc. But of course, it's not producing as much, so that's why we're finding less. And so again, about this casein, we can see that it's all about the quality, and I will always repeat that in any type of food that we're eating. We need to understand how the food is affecting us, but at the end, we always fall back into the same thing. that is the quality. And the last part of it, because of course, myself living with MS, that's a subject I've been studying the most. Uh, but I would like to talk about molecular mimicry, which is actually what's happening in autoimmune reactions. And I'm going to talk about specific protein. So I'm not going to talk about all the proteins in dairy because there's way too much. But I'm going to talk about one specific here. Molecular mimicry is when a protein from food looks similar to human tissues. And if the body creates antibodies to that type of food, that's when it mistakenly attacks the human tissues. So we see the problem here. It's not happening only in MS, but in MS, we found one of the culprits for that, and it's a protein found in cow's milk, again, which is called butyrophilin, and that's the one who cross-reacts with the oligodendrocyte of the myelin, which is under attack in MS as well. So that's a bit all the information that I wanted to share with you. I just checked my paper, but I'm not missing anything. There's so much more to say about it. Like actually something on top of my head, we're talking about leaky gut and how dairy can damage the gut lining. But some type of dairy are also full of probiotics. Like we might have heard a lot about raw milk. Some people with MS were actually healing themselves with raw milk and dairy. And yes, indeed, if we dive deeper and go back again on the type of food and the quality of it, some parts can be healing and some parts can be damaging. And the purpose here is actually to get to know for each individual what's hurting and what's helping. And so here I was trying to give you the clue for you to make your own research and dive deeper on that. Say for me, it's easier. Dairy is completely out of my diet, but having MS, I know that I will not touch cow's milk because now I know about this protein, because I know how that's the one that is the most transformed. And so I'm just saying dairy free because it works well for me. But I know if I want to go back into cheese sometimes, especially when I'm visiting my family in France, I will opt for goat cheese or sheep cheese or goat or sheep milk. That would be the safest option for me. But because I've been doing this work of healing the gut as well, which is crucial in autoimmune conditions. Right, that's all that I wanted to share with you today. If you have any question or comment, please, you can unmute or you can write in the chat if you want. I'm going to give you a few minutes if you want to write. No questions? All right. Well, if nobody wants to share or talk anything, I just want to really thank you all for being here today. Otherwise, I'm really enjoying this chat. If you have any comments or testimonials to send me, please email. If you have, I don't know, anything to say or subject to request, or maybe a time change, because I could see that there's a lot of people who register who actually couldn't make it at this time, who have liked to be here but couldn't make it. So please send me an email. I will always answer, and I love receiving stories from you. But again, thank you so much, and see you next time.